champions. I'm Amy Morgan, the feature writer for the Marriage Initiative, and I am just delighted today to introduce you to Dr. Harville Hendrix and his wife, Dr. Helen LaKelly Hunt. Both are internationally respected couples therapists, speakers, and New York Times bestselling authors. Together, they have written 10 books with more than 4 million copies sold, including the timeless classic, Getting the Love You Want, a guide for couples. They created the Safe Conversations process, which teaches people how to communicate and connect more effectively. Helen and Harville established the Imago Relationship Therapy, an approach practiced by more than 25,000 therapists around the world and counting, as well as co-founding Imago Relationships International, a nonprofit organization that trains therapists and educators worldwide. After their breakthrough book published in 1988, Harville was a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show 17 times. Helen was installed in the Women's Hall of Fame for her leadership in the global women's movement. Harville and Helen, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having us. It's an honor.
Well, the two of you really pioneered a whole new and much more effective method of couples therapy. Can you tell us about that, how you got started and what that looks like?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I love starting conversations about how we met. Another woman who was divorced said, Helen, let's come and hear a lecture. There's a man named Harville Hendrix talking about how to make marriage work. And so we both went and sat in it was a very humble place, but it was one of Harville's very first lectures. He had a green chalkboard, and he walked in and said, and there were about 25 of us in a wrought iron chairs in front of him. He said, welcome to this lecture. I have some surprising news to tell you. When we grow up, we date. We want to date someone we really, really like. And then we finish high school and we go to college and we keep dating until suddenly, oh, that's the person. And the other person goes, oh, yeah, I think you're the one I've been waiting for also. And the two people see the minister says, happy ever after. You are now husband and wife, happy ever after. And Harville turned around and wrote, romantic attraction, stage 1. Mm-hmm. And he drew a line in the chalkboard. And then he said, people don't know, but everyone in stage 1 ends up in stage 2. And he wrote a power struggle. And they argue and they fight, and sometimes they divorce possibly. But if you learn a few things in stage 2, everyone can get to stage 3, which is real love. Well, I decided to propose to this guy and on how to solidify. This was such a gift to the world. And yes, then Oprah, and then basically it began to spread and spread and spread.
Well, tell us about your process, because it's different, and you kind of pioneered this because you told me earlier that originally couples therapy at its outset was kind of not super successful, and yet then when you started to apply this new.
Only one person would go to a therapist and complain about the other person, the spouse, and then vice versa. There wasn't much couples therapy. Yeah. So we really began having couples come to the therapist at the same time, and you take turns talking and listening.
Yes.
Dialogue.
So the interesting thing about Helen's story about her coming to that lecture is that I was divorced at the time and had been divorced for 7 years from a 16-year marriage. And I really started that work because I couldn't figure out why I was divorced. And Helen and I were having conversations as we were developing our relationship. At the time, I don't think we thought about developing the relationship, but we kept talking.
Yeah.
You know, relationships tend to emerge if
We
you
were just
talk
working
long
on
enough.
our relationship.
So, so the question that that I was then doing, I was an academic who was also trained in clinical work. So, meaning that I taught the theory and also engaged in the practice of therapy. And my focus was marriage and family therapy at Southern Methodist University. So it was a kind of not only puzzling, but a little bit embarrassing that I'm a professor at the graduate level in a discipline called marriage and family therapy, in which I am divorced. So obviously, there's something missing here, either in my ability to be married or in the benefits of the system at that time, which was basically a couples therapy process that was focused on conflict resolution, communication skills, problem solving. In other words, all dealing with cognitive stuff. And it was not very successful across the discipline. The whole discipline was not successful. I think a 40% success rate.
Yeah.
Nothing survives in the business world at 40%. But in the world of pain and suffering, people kept going with hope.
Hmm.
So as Helen and I got better and better acquainted, we became dialogue partners. At the time, we hadn't developed dialogue, but we were talking about how come we're divorced,
And I had a degree. My second degree was
Yeah.
a degree in psychology,
yeah. So we could,
primal therapy, and dream analysis and things like that.
yeah. So she had the resources intellectually and academically and interest wise to engage in that conversation. So as a trained person. So what we finally did to develop this was we were doing couples workshops and so bringing people together on the weekend for intensives and studying them. And I was also experimenting in my couples work. Had a couples practice with new ways to do therapy. And
Yeah.
Helen and I had a huge blow up. We've always had an intense relationship, intensely negative as well as intensely positive. And we had a blow up. And Helen, I give her credit for beginning the change that led to Imago couples therapy, with dialogue being the therapeutic intervention. Because she said in the middle of our blow up in our living room, stop. One of us talk and then the other one talk. Now you can imagine we were both talking at the same time and talking
Yes.
over each other, which is not something very unusual. You know, that happens a lot. Even when you're not in a fight, people talk over each other. So, but I experienced something with that. That was a regulation instruction to stop that. And I calmed down and I decided in my next therapy session with a couple that I was going to do something different with them. So, because I was doing what's called couples therapy was basically parallel psychotherapy, helping each person kind of understand themselves and how that fit into the relationship, which didn't help people very much either. But so I turned them for the first time to face each other and to say, now, one of you talk. And I did what Ellen said, and then the other one talk, and then you talk, and then you talk. And they did that, and I could notice their body changing. They slowed down. But the partner, the wife in this situation, is very smart. And she said, can't we do something other than that? Like, would it be possible for him to tell me what he's hearing?
Yeah.
Oh, so she wanted to know what he was getting from what she was saying.
Yeah.
So he said, well, and I thought that was good. And he mirrored her back. Now we call it mirroring now. At that time it says, can you tell her what you heard? And I had to help him tell her without judging her. So, and then she did that. So I began to notice, and this is a long 5 or 6 year process, that when couples talk with each other in a alternating way, one talking and then being mirrored back, then the other one talking, being mirrored back, really interesting things happen. Namely, the problems they brought to therapy dropped away as they began to meet each other and hold each other in this dialogical process. So eventually it got clear to us that this was a system, that it had emerged, that it could be used, and it became the centerpiece of what we call imago relationship therapy. And so imago is the term. The theory of selection is that all of us, when we enter adulthood, have inside an image of the other that it will be attracted to fall in love. And at that time, it was 1980, we were we had done enough to know there was a theoretical system as well as a clinical system emerging here. So it's like, what will we call this? And they obviously call it image therapy, but nobody liked that. It sounded too bland and
boring. Yes,
absolutely boring. So I went home and started looking at the word image and found that it was the Latin word for image was imago. So I thought, well, I've had 2 years of training in Latin. I can borrow a Latin word. I'm an academic. We can do stuff.
It fits.
And it fits. So I brought that back and said to the group, we had a little training group going at that time, that's what I would propose. And they all liked it, but they also said, but nobody will know what it means. And for some reason, I still remember saying this, well, when they ask you, say they don't know what it means, tell them. Yeah. And because the fact that they don't know what it means will activate their curiosity. Image therapy wouldn't activate any curiosity. So that became the name of, and dialogue became the process of, imago couples therapy, which, as you said earlier, is now a global therapy.
Could you give us a demonstration? Because when you talk about mirroring, some of our marriage champions are probably familiar with that term and what it looks like, but some may not be. And you also added a few little questions in there that are kind of your special take on it. So I'd love you to show how that works.
So we could do that. You want to talk and me mirror you, or vice versa?
Oh, why don't I mirror you? Now, the reason we're romantically attracted is to heal the parental experience we had with the parent that made us feel worse. Mm-hmm. And so
let me see if I'm getting that. Yeah. So your view of the of attraction, who we're attracted to
unconsciously.
We're unconsciously attracted to. Am I getting that? Uh-huh. And we're unconsciously attracted to an image of a caretaker that we had in childhood, with whom we didn't have a good experience.
With whom we had the worst experience.
Had the worst experience.
And then my job is to heal Harville's childhood wound, and Harville's job is to heal my childhood wound.
And so, given that we're
attracted, that's why we're unconsciously romantically attracted to each other.
So, given that we're both have this image from a caretaker with whom we didn't get our needs met, we are attracted to somebody with whom we are expecting to get those needs met. Am I getting that?
Yes, the
right?
Norris Chumley videos.
And so Norris Chumley videoed that. And so when we fall in love, that I'm embellishing what you said a little bit. When we fall in love, something about all of that unmet need in childhood is the active agent of the romantic attraction, which is And am I getting what you're saying? Is there more you want to say about the theory?
Well, we have our every one of the couples in our workshops where you overmanaged. You have to do this. You have to do this. You have to do this, and bossed around when you were growing up, or did your parents not notice you?
Mm-hmm. So if I'm tracking that, there are basically two kinds of parents: the ones who boss you around, and the ones who ignore you,
that make you unhappy growing up. And
those are the two ways you can be made unhappy as you grow up. It's the kind of parenting that you got, and that's what produces the need, the wound. Am I getting that? Yeah. So is there more about that?
And we have in our weekend workshops, people fill out, they circle things and they have a conversation and they learn to do things differently.
So in the workshops we do, we help people fill out a form that helps them identify what type of caretaking they had and what the wound was.
And what they need to do to stretch and grow.
And what they
so
need to
that
do
their
to stretch and
partner
grow.
will.
And I think you said earlier, which I didn't mirror back, is that we're our goal, our responsibility is to help each other get heal that wound from childhood. Am I getting that? Yeah.
Unconsciously hoping.
But it's all unconscious. That's the driver. We don't know that that's what we're trying to do, but that's what we're trying to do. Am I getting that?
I love that. And I love your key questions. Am I getting that? And is there more?
Yeah.
And then you can, and in a way that also explains beautifully how the Imago relationship therapy works with that dialogue process. And then you have taken that to train now in these subsequent decades, so many therapists worldwide who use this now successful method of helping couples. And you talked about your couples retreats and your resources. I know you have online, in person. Let's talk about that, because some of our marriage champions may want to come and learn how to do this.
Great.
They want to have it, do it themselves,
Yeah.
and then come see you. And then they may want to go further and take your training.
Yes. So the first thing to know is we have a website called harvillandhelen.com. And that's where you can find what our schedule is. And we do face-to-face workshops at Kripalu and Omega retreat centers on the East Coast. And we also do Zoom couples workshops. And we also have, we don't now personally train, but we have a faculty of 40 trainers who are training therapists to become Imago. We just had, in fact, our annual faculty meeting, and I think 36 of the 40, and there were from 19 countries, showed up on Cape May for a week of faculty growth and development, mainly hugging and butt hugging, and it's a very because we are so committed to relationships, and everybody's committed to using the process in the faculty with each other. It becomes a very warm and embracing and wonderful. Everybody loves it. They go home saying, "Oh, I hated for this to come to an end," because because you're getting there something that's not available much outside of that, where the people are intentional about their relationships.
Yeah. And how about for the retreats? If someone would want to come or do it by Zoom, what would they learn? You said you had four different sessions that go through some of the dialogue process. Obviously, you train them how to use it.
Yeah.
Do you know? Could I give that one,
please,
and tell about the gentleman?
So you'd like to give that one,
yes,
and tell about the gentleman,
because this is so a weekend retreat outside of New York, Omega Retreat Center, and outside of Boston, Kripalu Retreat Center. And we do it 2 or 3 times a year. And people, so what Harville likes to do when the weekend retreat begins Friday night, people drive there, and some people have flown in from many have flown in from other states in the United States, and often other countries. And Harville likes to have the room arranged where the chairs are in a U shape, and we are at the front of the U shape with 3 rows of chairs circling that are like 75 or 90 couples, and so we say, "Welcome to our workshop Friday night." Now we are going to teach you a different way to talk. It's called dialogue, and we will give you a demo, and then we will want you to do it. and they turn their chairs. Now give each other an appreciation. One of you say something you appreciate about the other, and the other person mirror and validate and say, well, that makes sense. And then take turns. Then the other appreciates you about something. And so then and so the two people turn to each other and give each other an appreciation. And then after they've done that, we take Q&A. And Harville does most of the lecturing, and he likes it when I go around the room and say, how was that for you? And they go, does anyone want to share with the group? Does anyone want to share with the group? And I go up and they stand and I mirror them and da, da, da. So let me mention what the workshop can do. When we were doing that, so they go home and the next morning they come in, and now that you've learned how to do an appreciation with using the dialogue process, we're going to invite you to instead of having a conflict about something, ask not for what you don't want, but what you would like to have in the relationship. So think about something that you don't want and turn it into asking the other person, would you be willing in the future to do so and so? And so that was Saturday morning. The Saturday afternoon was the last. And I go around at the end, does anyone want to share? Does anyone want to share? And then Sunday morning, another positive thing, and they go home very happy. Well, let me tell you how powerful this is. When I was doing it once, in this big U shape of chairs, a businessman walked in with his wife, who was also very lovely. He was wearing a white shirt. He had very broad shoulders. It looked like he went to the gym a lot, and gray slacks. And his wife was gorgeous. So they came and sat very near us at the very front of where we did our lectures. And every time I went around and said, how was that for you? They never said anything. And they never raised their hands. And so many of them had raised their hand. I'd like to share this. It could be a problem. My spouse didn't do it exactly right, but he got into it and it was all good because an assistant came over and helped us, because we have clinical assistants to help the ones and might be having struggles. Well, this gentleman in the white shirt, the businessman, at the very last day, as it was the closing ceremony, and at the end, it was the last time I was going to get feedback, this gentleman raised his hand. I went, oh, well, yes, we would love to hear from you. Because I thought they had a perfect relationship and they hadn't said anything. Well, the opposite. He took his spouse's hand and he walked to the middle of the circle where everyone, and he said, I want everyone in this room to know this was our last chance. And he held up papers and he said, we want everyone in the room, these are our divorce papers. He tore them up and threw them in the air. He said, I came here with my biggest enemy and I'm leaving with my best friend.
Yeah.
And everyone cheered.
Well, and I think all of us listening to the story want to cheer too. That's where everyone's heart and hope is. Yeah. And that's such a beautiful story. I know it means so much to the two of you and so much to them and the legacy and generations. So thank you for doing that.
Yeah. So to put some structure to the things Helen said, we do dialogue. That's the basic thing. And then we ask people to make a zero negativity pledge. That's where change your frustrations into wishes. and state them as desires instead of criticisms. And then we help people identify that unmet need that they didn't get met in childhood,
Yes.
because that need is still alive and well in the marriage
Yeah.
until it's met. And then we do something called affirmations, in which you learn to value your partner because they exist, not because they do something for you. So people learn the steps that lead them from romantic love through the power struggle to real love, which is the third stage in the relationship. And what amazes us, and Helen always comments on this, is how much couples get done in one weekend with 4 2-hour sessions.
Wow.
Just amazing.
Well,
But we focus on the essentials and don't have a lot of periphery.
Mhm.
And it seems those essentials are
Mhm.
activators that create enough safety that people can be vulnerable enough to share at a deep enough level and learn to hold each other in each other's reality without criticizing them. And then that itself heals the childhood wound. That's
Mhm.
all we want, is to be
Mhm.
seen, heard, and valued.
yes.
And if we can count on that, we don't have a problem. If we
Mhm.
can't count on that, you've got a problem.
Mhm.
Yeah. I love you that you use the word safety, because that kind of transitions us to talk about safe conversations,
Yes.
which is something that applies not just in your spousal or your intimate relationship, but can apply really broadly in
Yeah.
any type of relationship or conversation. So let's talk about that. It's the same type of dialogue process, but with greater application.
Right.
I would like to begin that, but could I say a final
Sure.
thing about the other,
Sure.
the therapy? Guess what Harville's childhood wound was? His his mother died when he was about 6, and his father had died soon after he was born. So, with no family, parents, sister, but he was the youngest of 8.
9.
Yeah, he was number
I was the
9.
9th.
Yeah, he had 8 older siblings,
Wow.
and most of them were female. And he went to live with Rosalie, and she was bossy, bossy. And she would go, Harville, if it weren't for me, you'd be in the orphanage, and you have to clean up the dishes. You have to, but he had been working in the field. They were sharecropper's son. And so what Harville's childhood wound is, Helen, would you just leave me alone and not make me organize this and help you with this? And I just need time alone. And the favorite thing I love doing is watching Star Trek. And what I needed was to feel seen, loved, and cared about, because my family, H.L. Hunt was busy. So was my mother. She was a philanthropist. And I just didn't have anyone ever ask me, how was your day at school? So I would like to be seen. Well, guess what? We've been married 40 years. And we've been married 42 years. And about 6 months ago, he was watching Star Trek, but he was watching about the aliens. And we've been married 42 years, and Harville will tell you, I am asking Harville, could we watch movies about aliens for the first time? And sometimes it takes a while, but we have been, haven't we been? The Vatican has a place they're watching aliens, and we've been doing it for about 3 months.
Oh, I love that. How you've met together
Yes.
and such an inspiration.
Yeah.
Because I always thought aliens, okay, I'm just going to read my Bible.
Yeah.
And I'm Baptist, and I like honoring the ancestors, and so I'll just sort of forget that Harville's doing the aliens.
Yeah. When I was little, I went into outer space. I developed my imagination, which amazingly has served my professional life very well.
Yes.
To be creative.
Innovative.
But Helen has finally joined me with an interest in outer space and aliens, all of that.
I have to admit, I like a good Star Trek episode myself every now and then.
Okay. This has never been said in the interview.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lovely peek into y'all's personality. Harville, did you want to just tell us just a little bit about Safe Conversations quickly in the next few minutes?
Yeah.
I want to say the first sentence.
Okay.
He is, after all these years among therapy, spreading, this gentleman is depressed. I said, why are you depressed? He said, only 14% of the population goes for therapy. I said, what's wrong with that? And he said, Helen will never change the world that way. If we could get 2.4 billion people trained using our dialogue and get it out of the clinic and into the public, we could create a global humanity that is connected instead of people bombing and murdering each other. So I'm his partner, and
Yeah.
I'm helping with that idea.
Well, yeah, you're embodying it. And that's basically it. And you mentioned a part of it is that we discovered that dialogue is a powerful therapy for couples. But people began to use dialogue with their spouses, with their children, with their friends. And we began to just get aware, I did start there, that dialogue doesn't have to be limited to an intimate relationship.
It was for a while.
Can work any, it
what
was
we
for a
did.
while.
For what
So
we
one
did.
day it dawned on me, and I talked to Helen about it, is that we could teach this to everybody.
Yeah.
And it would do the same thing with everybody that it does with an intimate relationship, namely help them move from polarizing to connecting. So we took it out of the clinic, decided we would do an experiment. We came to Dallas about 10 years ago and started having non-intimate groups assemble and just taught them dialogue in a 4-hour workshop instead of a 10-hour workshop. It's a 4-hour workshop. And it had tremendous impact just teaching them how to talk. That's what we say is talking is the most dangerous thing people do.
Yeah.
Listening is the most infrequent thing people do. And dialogue helps people talk responsibly and listen without judgment.
Yes.
And when they do that, they connect. And it turns out that's all human beings want, is to experience connection in a safe environment. And they can't feel connection unless it is a safe environment. So we have now moved that into the public domain and it's now become global as well. It's being widely distributed in Liberia, in Kenya, and I think in 9 countries in Africa. Right at the moment, there are little spots where it's beginning to develop. This Friday, it will be introduced. 1,000 people will show up at a meeting in South Korea, and we will address them by Zoom to launch Safe Conversations in South Korea. So we have a lot of people who want to do it, but the goal here is to teach dialogue to 2.4 billion people in the next 30 years. And the reason that's the number is that you have to reach a tipping point in any system for the system to change. You don't have to change everything in a system, not 7.8 billion people, but you do have to change 25% of the system. So in 2050, which is a 30-year timeline for this project, 2.4 billion will be 25% of the world's population. So we're hoping in 30 years we'll reach that number, and we'll move from an individualistic, competitive civilization to a relational civilization, where the values will be everybody belongs to themselves, they're free, everybody's equal to everybody at all levels that are available, everybody's included, so there are no exclusions of anybody because of race, ethnicity, religion, gender, and difference will be celebrated as being the source of creativity. So that's all we're up to right now.
Could I do a last story?
Sure, of course, Helen.
It has to do with the continent of Africa. The person who began bringing a dialogue to Africa was a woman who was a woman philanthropist in Southern California. And she read a book on Mother Teresa, who won the Nobel Peace Prize. And she thought, why would that woman win the Nobel Peace Prize? And she worked in low-income countries. And she called me one day and said, Helen, Southern California has plenty of money. I want to take all my funding and I'm going to raise even more. And I want to go to Liberia, where the slaves were returned to the 51st state of the United States, because they had been worked the fields, and then when the country became a democracy, they had to be returned, and they were just dumped. And so they're very poor, but they speak in Palawa huts. So would you and Harville come and teach dialogue skills to them? And we started doing that about 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And about 9 months ago, there was a presidential runoff. And because it began to, we taught it to the high school students, and they loved it. They loved it. And they started singing songs about safe conversations is going to change the world. They went to sound studios, they sent things, but then not just high school. Oh, she said, I've heard you. She said, Helen, I've heard you and Harville say dialogue is so simple. It could be started. It should be taught in school. Would you and Harville will have a Zoom set up? It was during COVID, and we know all the high school principals, they know the high school teachers, come and present a couple the hours it takes to teach dialogue to the youth. And then after that, two guys went to a sound studio, banjo, a guitar. Safe Conversations is going to change the world. Everyone needs to use it. And then there was a presidential runoff recently where about 2 or 3 years later, one presidential candidate said, if I am elected president, safe conversation will be my priority. And
Exciting.
The other person said, if I'm elected president, this is my priority, this is my priority, this is my priority, and dialogue. Well, the first guy got elected, just saying. And now he has put Deborah, my friend, on the cabinet, and everyone on the presidential cabinet is now learning to solve problems using dialogue, talking and listening. Imagine if this was happening in Washington, D.C. right now.
Well, that would be so
Wouldn't that be amazing?
That would be so wonderful. Oh, Helen and Harville, thank you so much for being here today. It was just a delight to talk to you.
Thank you for having us. It was a delight to talk to you.
Yeah, the
Love your
world
enthusiasm.
can change. Women's philanthropy did that. At one point, women couldn't have a bank account. They couldn't have a credit card. Women and money. If a wealthy woman married a man that wasn't wealthy, and they divorced, the men got all the woman's money.
Oh.
If you look back in history, I mean, the world can change, and you can change the world, and that's what we're trying to do with dialogue.
Well, and that's such a wonderful aspiration, to teach people how to connect and solve problems better by knowing how to talk and listen. So as always, Marriage Champions, if you'd like more information about Helen and Harville, about the Imago resources and Safe Conversations, you can find us at marriageinitiative.org and marriageresources.org.